Well, ladies and gentlemen, a very good Wednesday morning to each of you, and welcome to the 2017 Mayor Jacobs Orange County Economic Summit. We're so glad that each of you were able to carve time out of your busy calendars and schedules to join us here today. This is the fifth consecutive year that Mayor Jacobs has convened from across our community business, civic, educational, and economic development leaders to get a snapshot on the economic landscape here in our community, and to also have a glimpse around the corner, a peek around the corner, if you may, on what are the impacts and trends that will be affecting our prosperity here in Central Florida. Now, the mayor and her staff have put together a power-packed program today. We are going to hear from a nationally recognized economist who also happens to call Central Florida his home. You are going to see and hear for the very first time the public unveiling of a talent pipeline study that's being conducted. And you're going to hear from a very talented panel of some of the region's top education and economic development professionals. But to begin appropriately this morning, will you please stand and join me as we give our Pledge of Allegiance to the nation's flag. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, and please take your seats. Well, it's my pleasure now to recognize those representatives that we've elected to stand for us in the halls of government power, whether it be the local or the state or federal levels. First of all, I want to recognize some of our Orange County commissioners that are here this morning. We have with us Orange County Commissioner Betsy Vanderlei. Also, Orange County Commissioner Brian Nelson. I know I saw Orange County Commissioner Pete Clark. And we're expecting later to see Orange County Commissioner Jennifer Thompson, Commissioner Emily Bonilla, and Orange County Commissioner Victoria Siplin. Thank you to all of our commission members for joining us here today. We also are blessed to have a lot of other elected officials that have joined us this morning. I'm going to read off the names, ask each of you to please stand, remain standing so we can recognize all of you at once. We have Representative Bruce Antone from the state legislature, also Representative Mike Miller, the Honorable Daisy Morales. Our Orange County tax collector is represented here today from Scott Randall's office. Our property appraiser, Rick Singh, is here. Also from the city of Winter Park, Mayor Steve Leary. From the city of Maitland, Mayor Dale McDonald. From the town of Windermere, Mayor Gary Brune. Say that 3 times fast. From the town of Eatonville, we have a representative from the mayor's office there as well. The city of Popka, Commissioner Diane Velasquez. From Belle Isle, City Commissioner Ed Gold. From the city of Edgewood, Councilman John Dallas. From Osceola Commission, Commissioner Christina Morrison. And from Orange County Public Schools, our chairman, Bill Sublett. Orange County Public School Board member Christine Moore. Orange County Public School member Pam Gould. And I know I saw Orange County Public School Board member Nancy Robinson here this morning. From Osceola County Schools, Board member Jay Wheeler is expected to join us today. We also have a representative from U.S. Senator Nelson's office. And we have joining us from Orange County Sheriff's Office, our Undersheriff, Ray Rivera. Please join me in welcoming all of our elected officials here this morning. Now, of course, summits like this do not happen by accident. It is not the result of some spontaneous combustion, and all of a sudden invitations go out, and there are flyers on the table and food and bread to share amongst those at your table. No, it happens because we have a great team of wonderful and generous sponsors for our program. I want to direct your attention to the screen to see all of our sponsors, and I want to specifically single out the good folks in Florida Hospital for being our host sponsor this morning. Please join me in thanking all of our sponsors this morning. It is now truly my honor to introduce to you our mayor, Teresa Jacobs. Now, if you're going to take over the helm, keep those hands warmed up because there'll be lots more of that. If you're going to take over the helm of one of the state's largest metropolitan county governments, with their size budget, their responsibilities, and the number of citizens we have and guests every day within the county limits, you better have some serious experience and gravitas under your belt. And in that case, there's no doubt that when it comes to that experience, our mayor has it in buckets. She was first elected in 2010 with a mere 68% of the vote. Just kind of squeaked right in there, didn't you, Mayor? And then she doubled down in 2014 when she ran unopposed. She served 2 terms as county commissioner before that, from 2000 to 2008. Prior to that, she served as the president of the Orange County Homeowners Alliance, and she previously had a successful career in banking. On today's topic of economic development, she has been a stalwart champion for our important tourism industry, while also serving as the tip of the spear for the Orlando You Don't Know the Half of It campaign, which is showcasing the growing diversity of our community's economic portfolio. She created the Blue Ribbon Task Force on how our community can best protect and grow the national leading simulation, modeling, and training industry cluster. And you will not find a stronger advocate for citizen engagement in the governance process as today's gathering holds testament. Will you please join me in welcoming our host, our convener, and our Orange County Mayor, Teresa Jacobs.
Oh, thank you, Fred, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Gosh, I'm so excited to welcome each of you to this year's Economic Summit. Folks, we are living in extraordinary times right here in Central Florida. And I want to just take a break for a minute from talking about economics to talk about last night. What a phenomenal accomplishment of our law enforcement community. I mean, you want to talk about extraordinary and collaboration. Those are things that constantly come to mind when I think of Orange County, Orlando, the Central Florida community. And that the effort between OPD, between the Sheriff's Office, between FDLE, between the federal government, all of them working so hard to bring to justice a killer in our midst. And how thankful we are for some good old-fashioned police work, coupled with some good, new, high-tech police work. So while I know that we have much to learn about the great work that they did to find Markeith, I am also confident that the high technology resources that and assets that we have in our community are a big part of the safety and security of our community and our nation in the future. So with that, I'm also really excited to report that we remain one of the top regions, I think the top region in the nation. We'll hear from Dr. Snaith in a few minutes on that, for job growth. And that's pretty extraordinary. By so many other measures as well, Orange County continues to rank among the highest places in the United States or the world for that matter, to live, to work, and to raise a family. And it's thanks to each of you, as well as the commitment of our regional business community partners, our community leaders that are here today, our educators. Thank you. It's so good to have you with us, Dr. Jenkins, and I'm not sure if I think we have other members of your school board with us today. Oh, so good to see all of y'all. Education is such an important part. We're going to talk about job training and education and what's new in that arena throughout this morning's event. But it's all of you. It's every citizen that engages actively in our community that makes us stronger economically and increases the social fiber and fabric of our community. We couple that with the collaboration of the culture of collaboration that I've discussed, that I think that the whole nation is becoming aware of the fact that nobody does that better than Central Florida. It's a critical part of our success. You add to that the fact that we have an incredible infrastructure investment going on throughout our region, something that very few regions our size with our kind of job growth has. Most places have obstacles in their way, that they don't have the land, the space, or the money to build the infrastructure they need to maintain the growth. That's not the case here. We're in the midst of historic infrastructure investment. In Orange County alone, our INVEST program is allocating more than $300 million. And that's without raising taxes. And I want to be clear, that's not our regular capital improvements program. That's in addition to what we do every year. $300 million, and we're in the middle of a 5-year program. We are doing everything from building new fire stations to making pedestrian safety improvements. And I don't think anybody has missed some of the tragedies that we have had, not just at UCF, and thank you, UCF and Dr. Hitt, for all your support with our pedestrian safety initiative that we're jointly doing there, but in other places in our community where too many people are dying trying to cross our roads. So pedestrian safety is a very, very important component of our safety infrastructure. But completing the Performing Arts Center is also a very important part of our infrastructure when we talk about economic development, because creating that quality of life where people want to move here because they want to live here and they want to raise their families here. That's an economic development tool as well. We're expanding our parks and recreation, and we are continuing to invest in the lifeblood of our community, and that's our small business programs. And topping our INVEST program is $200 million of transportation improvements. When you look at it in the aggregate, and I mean everything that's going on here in Central Florida, it's incredibly clear that we are outpacing virtually every other region in the country. For example, we're about to double the size of our international airport. Very, very few communities have the land to do that, let alone the money to do that. Nobody that lives here can miss the fact that we are in the middle of a major transformation of I-4. Love it, hate it, whatever you might feel about it today, at some point, I promise you, it will be finished and it will be better. And I do want to commend, I'm joking, but I want to commend DOT for the great job that they're doing managing this while accommodating the traffic. But we'd be in much worse shape if we didn't have Sunrail. How quickly we have come to love and expect Sunrail to be part of our infrastructure. But we're not just adding infrastructure, we're really changing the way we live today and the opportunities for how our children can live tomorrow. Honestly, we're riding such a wave of activity and investment that for me, and I'm sure you find the same, sometimes it's hard to keep up with everything that's going on. In a nutshell, though, we're focused on creating a business infrastructure that supports job creation, that supports a flourishing creative class, and that nurtures all of those with a dream to pursue. This morning, we're going to hear from many distinguished experts, including our own UCF Dr. Sean Snaith. I say our own because we are so thrilled to have him as a part of our community. He is both internationally recognized and renowned as an economist. He also does a little sitcom stand-up act, and we look forward to that each time and always put a little pressure on Dr. Snaith for his humor. But he brings it home, and he makes economics understandable and interesting. And I happen to love economics, so I kind of hate saying that because I think it should always be interesting. But we're thrilled to have you as a part of our community. We appreciate enormously that you're here each year when we do this. I'm afraid that at some point the demand for Dr. Snaith is going to be so high that it's going to be hard to get him to these events. Fortunately for me, if you want to look at it this way, I try to find the silver lining. I'm termed out in 2018, so I only have one more of these to host. That's bad news, but the good news is I'm pretty sure if I book him now, I'll have him here for next time. The next mayor will be on their own on that one. Seriously, I'm deeply grateful to all those who continue to make these gatherings possible, including our incredibly loyal partner and sponsor, Florida Hospital. You know, for as long as I can remember, Florida Hospital has been investing in our community, from mental health to housing to homelessness and public health. They've been unwavering in their commitment to support our community. They directly employ more than 20,000 professionals. I bet you didn't know that. And they give back more than $370 million to benefit this community. I believe Lars Homan and Daryl Toll may be here with us today. Oh, there you guys are. Thank you. Daryl, stand up and let us acknowledge you. Thank you so much. If you haven't had a chance to meet Daryl, he is as delightful as he is qualified, and we're thrilled to have your leadership in our community. And again, we're so thrilled to have your support of this event and so many other things. This year's summit also includes a special focus on workforce development. And workforce development is one of the vital factors in our economic success. I know we're all anxious to get started, so I'm going to close with this. From small business initiatives to groundbreaking initiatives that could create entire new industries, just like we see with modeling, simulation, and training. Orange County government is committed to working with each of you to create a future that's brimming with opportunity and promise for everyone. Nobody tackles challenges as well as we do, and no one does it with more collaboration. But it's thanks to each of you in this room and to a host of other partners who couldn't be here with us today that we're making such great strides economically, socially. And I wanted to thank each of you for taking the time. I'm thrilled to see a packed room. Thank you for being here with us this morning, sharing your time and your talent with us this morning and every day that you live here in Orange County. I look forward to a fascinating program, and I am now going to turn this podium back over to a good dear friend and also another UCF asset to us, and that's Fred. Fred, thank you so much. UCF, thank you so much. Where would we be without our great university? Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Jacobs, and thank you for both the leadership and the laser-like focus that you've maintained on economic development for our community here through the years. Well, folks, as the mayor mentioned, every year at this summit, she has laid the foundation or had the foundation for the summit poured through an economic forecast. And we're very fortunate today to have Dr. Sean Snaith with us this morning to give that forecast. Now, normally, when I hear at a program like this or a conference that I'm going to hear from an economist, usually one of three things goes through my mind. I start looking for sharp objects that I can poke into my thigh to keep me awake during the presentation. I might start looking or at least imagining what our summer vacation will be like for the families, the mountains, is the beach. Or I might start going to the smartphone and pull up YouTubes on how to build a better birdhouse. But that is not the case when you have Dr. Sean Snaith in front of you. And for those of you that have heard Dr. Snaith before, you know that he makes economics understandable, interesting, and enjoyable. And for those of you that have not had the pleasure to hear from Sean Snaith, and this is the first time you have today, you're in for a very special treat. And he will spoil it for you, and he'll ruin it for any other economists that might stand before you in the future. Now, Dr. Snaith is the director of UCF's Institute for Economic Competitiveness and a nationally recognized economist in the field of business and economic forecasting. Sean applies academic expertise to real-world problems. He has served as a consultant to local governments, multinational corporations, and is a much sought-after resource for national news organizations such as the Wall Street Journal, USA Today, New York Times, CNBC, and Fox Business News. Will you please join me in welcoming my favorite 6'3" economist, Dr. Sean Snaith.
I'm 6'5", Fred. Thank you very much. It's always a pleasure to speak to this summit each and every year, Mayor. Thank you very much for continuing to invite me back. As Fred said, economists aren't always repeat invitees to events, so I'm pleased to be here. I am a little bit concerned because I think Orange County is doing some severe damage to the discipline of economics, quite frankly, because this is a field that is the intellectual legacy of Reverend Thomas Malthus. It's a field that's known often as the dismal science. But things, as the mayor is encapsulated, are really going quite well in Orange County. It's more like the dimple science in Orange County because there's so much to smile about when it comes to the economy. And today I'd like to talk a little bit about that outlook, but start from a larger perspective of the national economy. I was struggling a little bit for content, quite frankly, for today's presentation. There hasn't been a lot going on economically to really talk about, but so I've scraped together a few slides, and I'd like to share those with you today, if you don't mind. Well, we had an election, and it's over, and that's a really good thing. Maybe not the outcome for some, but the fact that it's over and that uncertainty is gone. Now we know what the next administration is going to be. And so, my question and my focus, of course, is what does that mean for the economy? How will the policies of the incoming administration impact the U.S. economy? And, I've talked over the years here that this economic expansion, the one that's followed the Great Recession, has been historic. It's been historically weak. Average real GDP growth throughout this recovery has been about 2.1%. The growth in the overall level of GDP has been about half of what we experienced in the previous two expansions. And I talked about a number of reasons over the years and on this very stage as to why I thought that might be the case. It looks like we're in for a fairly significant break in terms of policy as this new administration comes into office. A significant break from what we've seen over not just the past 8 years, but you could say the past 12, maybe even 16 years in many regards as far as some policies are concerned. Will this sort of shock us out of this low growth, this low orbit that we've been in as far as the economy? And another way to sort of frame that question is, will Trump lift us up where we belong? Now, some of you are chuckling, and you probably of a certain age. You might recognize that line, that lyric. It's from a song that was the theme song of a movie. I don't even want to think about how old the movie is, but the movie was An Officer and a Gentleman. You know, you can feel free to Google it for the millennials and such in the room. But this was a movie with Richard Gere and Deborah Winger in it, and there's a famous scene, really touching scene, where Richard Gere carries her into the factory floor where she works, and that song plays. Love lifts us up where we belong. It's sung by Joe Cocker and Deborah Warren, I believe, sang that theme song. Now, I understand, I looked at the election results for Orange County, and I understand that 60%, if this is a representative sample, 60% of you looked a little like Joe Cocker as those election results came in. He's kind of known for contorting his face as he sang. But I want to say, when it comes to the economy, probably this is going to be a good development. For all the other concerns and worries that you might have, I think that the policies that we're seeing being laid out and the cabinet appointments that are being made will by and large boost economic growth and inflation in the U.S. economy. And so, in preparation, of course, for today's remarks, I like to do a lot of research, and so I found a pretty good source when it comes to getting into the nuts and bolts of what the policies of the Trump administration might look like. And I've thoroughly reviewed all those tweets. And based upon what we know, and I a little bit tongue-in-cheek here with that, because the reality is we don't have a tremendous amount of detail as far as these policies are concerned. And the devil often is in the detail. But based on what we do know and the general direction in which we're headed, some of the main planks of this economic platform of the incoming administration have to do with fiscal policy. I think fiscal policy in the Trump administration is going to be a double-barreled stimulus to the economy, with economic growth being driven both by increases in government spending, but also impacted by tax reform and significant tax cuts. We've all heard about the $1 trillion infrastructure plan. Just to get some perspective on the magnitude of that proposed spending plan, in the American Reinvestment and Recovery Act, which was the Obama administration's stimulus act, as it was often referred to, the infrastructure spending piece of that particular legislation was $100 billion. So this is 10 times the size of the infrastructure spending that was part of that stimulus act. So this is a big spending plan. It won't immediately impact the economy. We learned that really there is shovel ready is sort of a myth when it comes to infrastructure projects. There are significant lags which are in place when it comes to finally seeing an impact on the economy. So this type of spending will probably show itself more in 2018 and 2019 than in 2017, but it's a significant increase in spending. I think we'll likely see a boost in defense spending as well. And I think that will have some positive effects here in the region, particularly with our modeling and simulation industry. So the other side of this fiscal policy is tax reform. And again, the details are pretty limited, but what's been proposed are reforms both on the income tax, personal income tax side, as well as the corporate tax side. Some of what I've seen tweeted out there is a reduction in tax rates, a reduction in the number of tax brackets when it comes to personal income tax, increases in the standard deduction to levels that for many people it will greatly simplify the process of filing taxes, which, as we are entering that season, we're all reminded, has become an increasingly complex proposition. In fact, the IRS estimates that the amount of time it takes for a taxpayer to sort of complete the entire 1040 form filing, and that includes, gathering all your receipts out of the shoebox and putting it together and filling out the paperwork, that is around 42 hours it takes to do that process. Now, this is the IRS estimating, so I'm guessing it's probably lowballed a little bit there, but that's a week's worth of woman and manpower that is not out there producing goods and services in our economy, that is merely going to the process of paying taxes. So I think a simplification there would be a welcome development. Those labors, I think, would be much more fruitfully used in production than in paying taxes themselves. On the corporate side, you certainly heard time and again about the rate of corporate taxes in the U.S. being one of the highest in the world. There is proposal to reduce that level. There's also a proposal to help bring back some of the profits which are currently held overseas by U.S. companies. Those companies that do business in multiple economies around the world, they structure production and profits in a way to minimize their tax burden. And this has given birth to an entire industry, the transfer pricing industry, that advises businesses how exactly to do that. Well, one proposal is to offer sort of a holiday tax rate on the repatriation of profits held overseas back into the U.S. And the figure, I don't know if anyone has an exact measure of it, but the figure I've heard is in the area of $2.5 trillion currently being held overseas by U.S. companies. So incentivizing them to bring that money back to the U.S. and to reinvest it here, I think, is a tremendous catalyst for economic growth, and I think another piece of this fiscal policy that will help boost growth going forward. Regulatory relief. That was, this has always been one of the, my pet peeves, I guess, over the years, and it's been an ongoing process, and I think last year I talked about the impact of regulation, not just over the past 8 or 12 years, but over decades in the U.S., and how this steady growth in this regulatory burden has really reduced economic growth. Specifically, a couple of big pieces of legislation. The Dodd-Frank law, I think, is going to be rolled back significantly. That's something that I think will benefit certainly the financial sector, but I think will benefit the economy as a whole. Speaking to banking associations around the country, I've heard the same story time and time again, especially from community bankers, that the burden of Dodd-Frank, and not just Dodd-Frank, they also mentioned the Patriot Act, quite frankly, as being a huge burden in terms of compliance for small banks. But I've heard time and time again, before this onslaught of regulation, they had somebody in their bank, their community bank, that worked part-time to handle compliance for the bank. And post this wave of regulation, they had 4 or 5 full-time people doing compliance for the bank. And that's, for a community bank, it's a big thing, because that comes right from the bottom line. Those employees aren't helping savers plan for their futures. Those employees are not helping business women fund investment. They're just producing red tape to feed a regulatory beast. And so I think by rolling that back, that allows community banks to get back into the business of what they're supposed to be doing. And I think that's very important for small business, because I think the ties between the community banks and small businesses in an area are going to be much different than the ties between small businesses in an area and some large bank which is headquartered out of state. You make an application to a community bank, the banker may know the business person that's applying. Their kids may play soccer together. They may have done business in the past. They have a history and a knowledge that's not going to show up on a form that goes to a processing center that gets funneled through an algorithm that spits out an answer. And so I think that, to me, the regulatory rollback has the greatest potential to very quickly catalyze economic growth. And we could talk about the Affordable Care Act. This is probably the most difficult situation in terms of repealing and replacing that, and I don't have the answer there. But I do think whatever comes in the wake of it will likely be less complex. It will not take as long to implement and to roll out as we saw with the rollout of the Affordable Care Act. I'm glad I'm not in healthcare, quite frankly, because wow, what a ride it's been and it's going to be, and certainly in the insurance area, health insurance as well. But there are dozens of other executive orders or agency-based acts that have been made that I think could very quickly and without a whole legislative process be pulled back. And I think that has the prospect to raise growth significantly, maybe much more than the fiscal policy we spoke about earlier. I see as a possibility, maybe not in 2017, but 2018, 2019, an upside for growth nationally at 3.5% or 4%. That seemed, on the path we were on, that seemed completely unimaginable. As we were 8 years of 2.1% growth, somehow jumping up to 4% didn't seem likely without some sharp shock, some break from the policy path that we're on. And I think that's the one thing that the election has provided. Trade policy, I think this is a potential pitfall. A lot of tough talk regarding our trading partners, threats of tariffs and other barriers to trade in response to unfair competition, currency manipulation. Certainly China has been called out, Mexico as well. And there's been some concern raised by economists and others that, this could precipitate a trade war. You slap a punitive tariff on me, well, countries don't turn the other cheek often. And so they return the favor in kind, and you get in a situation where this back and forth is severely damaging. There are no winners in a trade war. Everybody loses. And I think that it's that mutually assured economic destruction, quite frankly, that will actually prevent this from taking place. I think a lot of this is posturing, and I don't know, anybody from New York, New Jersey area in the room? Yeah, I'm not referring to y'all. But I mean, I've had friends and coworkers over the years from that part of the country, and they, folks from that region have a certain, this is delicate, yeah. That's why I'm not in politics, Fred. They're prone to hyperbole, maybe, brash sometimes. And so I think there's some of that, quite frankly, with our president-elect. And I try to run it through that forget about it filter when he's speaking, and then try to get down to it. So people are worried about it. I'm not terribly concerned, but it is a potential Achilles heel. Trade's not going to go away. And you can slap punitive tariffs on China, that manufacturing will just go somewhere else. The genie doesn't go back in the bottle when it comes to trade and globalization, and we shouldn't expect it to. As always, policy matters, and I think it's critical, and you've heard me talk about the impact of policy, and it's important that the incoming administration avoid what I've termed Sky Mall policies. I don't need to get into how I came up with that term. You've probably heard the story repeatedly. But it was a purchase from Sky Mall magazine of a closed steamer that was expensive and didn't do the job. And that led me to the epiphany that Sky Mall puts out catalogs with economic policies in them as well. And some of the policies we've seen over the years clearly came from Sky Mall. So we want to avoid that. We don't need any more Sky Mall policies. I flew to Richmond to speak to the Virginia bankers last weekend, and was able to go online and look at Sky Mall a little bit. I just wanted to share some of what I saw, just a couple quick slides. What you're looking at there is, and I travel a lot, and I saw Phil from OIA, which is a fantastic airport. Let me just tell you, I think I've been in every airport in this country, and it's marvelous, and the expansion is a huge driver for our region. But traveling a lot, you're in this aluminum tube, and everybody's just like coughing out their viruses into this, and then you've got that nozzle that just blows the concentrated stream of air and viruses on your face. So you're always worried about getting sick. Well, this is a personalized air purifier that you see. You just wear it around your neck, and I'm not exactly sure the science of it, if it's like a crystal or something that just makes you pure, but supposedly it clears the air around you, and the side effect, as you can see, you end up with hair like the president-elect. This was a curious item I saw. What you're looking at is a wildfire survival kit. You should probably always have one of those, I would say. I don't know if you can see, the items might be hard to recognize. There's a sign that says help, which I hope is fireproof. And right by the camo bag, I don't know if you can see, there's a little orange can. And what that is a fire extinguisher, which I guess would be useful if you were caught in a bonsai tree forest that somehow burst into flames. But other than that, I don't know how useful it would be. And then lastly, this is interesting, for the gardener / pyromaniac in your family. Instead of just using an old-fashioned weed trimmer with a spinning piece of nylon cord, this device allows you to actually, use a propane tank and just burn all the growth from between the cracks in your driveway. I'm not sure, but I heard that John Morgan has one. He's a big proponent, longtime proponent of burning weeds. Anyway, so where are we going nationally? The job market continues to improve in the U.S. economy. We're adding jobs. At the pace of job growth, we're not seeing blowout numbers, and I don't think we're going to see 300,000, 400,000 jobs added a month anytime soon, but we see a solid 170,000 jobs. Unemployment rate continues to drop down. I think it could get below 4% over the next couple of years. But most importantly, the last job report showed wage and salary growth at the fastest rate we've seen in this recovery, 2.9%. That's been the missing link in this economic recovery, and the weak growth, I think, has been behind it. But to see faster wage and salary growth, I think, is critically important. Domestically, I do think the economic environment has been improved or will be improved by a number of the policies we expect to see going forward. But that election and that election result really does nothing in terms of the global environment. And there remain a number of concerns overseas, things that I think we must pay attention to, things that could have an impact right here in Orange County. I'm not going to spend a ton of time. I know we wanted to do some questions, and I always struggle to get through my slides. But the Chinese economy remains a concern. China's had 3 quarters in a row of growth of exactly 6.7% in real GDP. Do you know how many times the U.S. economy has experienced the exact same growth rate 3 quarters in a row? A guess? 0. It's never happened. So I don't put very much faith in the data, the official economic statistics here, because I just don't see that as very likely. There's a debt bubble in China, by estimates, 260% or so of GDP. And, those little books about debt bubbles, they never end with, and they all lived happily ever after. There's never been a book about a debt bubble that ended that way. So the question is, how bad could it get? Could it be as bad as the debt bubble we went through here in the U.S.? I would say no, because financial markets are not as complex, and you don't have these mortgage-backed securities sort of woven and rewoven throughout the financial sector that we had. But still, it's something to pay attention to. Europe, the Brexit vote, continued problems. They never did fix the root of the crisis in 2010 in Greece, and the strain that they're feeling with the migrant crisis as well. A lot of cracks appearing in this great European experiment. And said back in 2010, I don't think this is going to end anytime soon, and this may very well be the process of the EU unwinding. Brazil and Canada, I think Brazil's sort of past the worst. I think things are improving, but that doesn't mean things are good. The Canadian dollar continues to weaken against the U.S. dollar. And in general, the dollar continues to strengthen. And I think will do so going forward. With the Fed raising interest rates, our economy growing at a faster rate than the rest of the world, a stronger dollar is likely to be in our future for the next couple of years. And so that makes visitors, it makes it more expensive to visit the U.S. and to visit Florida and Central Florida. Where do we think we're going? Growth, I think, this year will come close to 3% in the U.S. economy. Again, I'm not ready to say it's morning in America again and that we're going to see 4.5% and 5% growth because I haven't seen the details. And, as we learned in Florida, even when one party sort of runs everything, they can still find a way to fight among themselves. So, I don't know what's going to get through the legislative process and what's going to get hung up on various political battles. But I think consumer spending will continue to accelerate. I think as wage and salary growth picks up, that's a critical piece of that. It was all great when gas prices fell. We were putting less money in the tank, which meant more money left in our wallets and our pocketbooks. But that kind of windfall is not the same as having a higher paycheck every 2 weeks being deposited into your bank account. I'd much rather have the equivalent amount deposited as part of a pay raise than as savings at the tank. Consumer confidence jumped up to levels we haven't seen since 2004. The stock market, of course, continues to close in on Dow 20K. So a lot of indications of confidence about the economy. And in fact, interest rates in the wake of the election jumped up almost immediately in anticipation of both higher growth and inflation. And so I think as far as the economy is concerned, the outlook's improved because the policy change, I think, by and large, is going to benefit growth and is going to help get inflation up to the level that the Fed has been struggling to get to for many years. And that's good because here in Florida and Central Florida, we've been outperforming the national economy. We've been doing well despite the larger economic environment. So it would be nice to get a little wind beneath our wings, as it were, from the U.S. economy, and that way we can continue to soar high, but we won't have to flap as hard to do so. Looking at the state and bringing it down here to Central Florida, the housing market, I think we're still in catch-up mode there. There have been a period of plateaus in housing starts, even as both population and job growth have continued on a strong upward trend. And so I think that's been driving housing prices. We're seeing double-digit price appreciation for the past couple of years. A lot of people concerned or have asked me, is this another housing bubble? Seems familiar. We don't want to go there again. My answer is it's not a bubble because we don't have that sugary, easy finance and the speculation that was so much a part of the last time we saw double-digit price appreciation. I think this is a good old-fashioned shortage, as it were. Supply just not keeping up with demand. And so as building catches up, I think we'll start to see that price appreciation ease. Population growth continues to be strong. All sources, natural increase, births over deaths, domestic immigration into the state, and international immigration. And I don't see any reason for that to change anytime soon. And that is an easy way to grow your economy, is to put more people in it. Unemployment in the state's basically tracking what we're seeing nationally. I think it will continue to fall going forward. I think faster wage growth is going to be part of that equation as well. Florida's economy, Florida's state GDP has been growing faster than national GDP. I think that'll continue to be the case, looking at 4 to 4.5% growth over the next several years in real GDP. That's real solid growth. That's strong growth for an economy as large as ours. It's been the case since about 2012. Payroll job growth, continues. The state's doing quite well, growing at about twice the rate the national labor market is when it comes to job creation. I don't see any reason that that's going to change in the near future. Construction's one of the faster growing in terms of percentage rates in the state. Still, you can see the huge difference from where we were in that sector at the peak of the housing bubble and where we are now. But the trends are quite strong. Professional business services, white-collar jobs, again, one of the faster-growing sectors in the state. I think that'll continue to be the case. Higher average salaries in these sectors, and of course, they require skills. Leisure and hospitality, huge driver early on in the recovery and continued to have its momentum. I think we've weathered a number of headwinds in tourism. I was concerned 6 months ago. I was a bit of a Debbie Downer a little bit. I was worried about a lot of things, from Brexit to Zika to Brazil and how that might impact tourism. But this sector is just sort of like some of the superheroes that are part and parcel of it, just have deflected all these bullets and continue to grow. I think that growth may be dampened somewhat by some of those headwinds, but it's certainly not going to be turned around as a result of it. Statewide, job growth by sector. You can see pretty much growth across the board, the exception of the information sector. That's still struggling, the whole legacy media and how information is, how news and fake news is generated and disseminated, and we're still trying to figure all that out. And so I think that sector continues to deal with those structural changes. But beyond that, you can see job growth really across the board. And what you're looking at is average growth through 2019 per the Institute's most recent forecast. Population growth, very robust here in Central Florida. As we mentioned, statewide, it continues to grow. That feeds directly into economic activity. That is a fundamental underpinning of the housing market. Population growth is economic growth, and we continue to enjoy that here in Florida and Central Florida. As the mayor mentioned, we are, a job-producing machine. And I think as we get to the real meat of the program today, our challenge shifts. We don't have the same challenge here that they do at this same event in Detroit. We have the jobs. I think now it is making sure that we have the workers to fill those jobs and that have the skills. And I've long said that in the long run is far more important, with all the back and forth about incentives, which I support, but in the long run, far more important to job creation and economic growth is a skilled and dynamic labor force. That is the strongest pheromone to business attraction and business growth, and I'll look forward to hearing more about that when my remarks are concluded. Orlando, the metro area, you can see growth in all sectors, including the information sector. And the pace of growth, if you compare that with the statewide averages, much stronger than we're seeing at the state level. So, we're growing faster than a state that's growing faster than the national economy, and not by a little bit, by a significant amount. That's what I mean. Where's the dourness here? I'm just not much of an economist, it seems, with data like this, but there is just a lot going on that has driven growth here, and that momentum is in place as 2017 kicks off and going forward. I think we'll continue to see this kind of economic performance. So looking at the county itself, real gross metro product or metro GDP, you're looking at by 2019 close to a $90 billion economy here in Orange County. And I'm going to go through some of these kind of quickly because I did want to get to some questions. But population growth, as you can see, continues steadily upward. The county, I believe, is the fastest growing population-wise in the state. We see it every day. And I think that continues to feed growth here. Jobs continue to be added. The mayor's touched on that already. We think the trends are in place and will continue. Construction, very important here. A lot of big public works going on. But it's not just public infrastructure construction that's taking place. I was trying to run through my mind how much private investment's going on just on International Drive. And I probably got that figure wrong, and Orange County folks can correct me, but it's probably $600-700 million or more just in private projects that are underway or planned there. So it's not just big public infrastructure; it's the whole gamut of construction projects, and it continues to fuel that sector here, and it's one of the fastest growing in terms of job creation. Education and health. Health will continue to grow even as it navigates the tumult that policy change has imposed on it. We've got the medical city, the neighborhood where I live, tremendous amount of activity there. I know UCF got initial approval for the teaching hospital, downtown UCF, growth at Valencia and throughout that sector in the economy. And it's grown even in the worst of the recession, and I think will continue to do so going forward. Leisure and hospitality, a lot of projects, as we said, a lot of development. Love that water park out at Universal there. It's almost reminds me of like a termite mound on the savannah, right? You drive by and there's all these workers, like they look so small on this giant thing, but that's not. There's plenty of other activity going on there as well. And as the airport expands and these transportation nexus at the airport comes to fruition, I think this sector is going to be one of the strengths of our economy for the next several years and beyond. Professional business services, strong growth there. Financial activities, I think once we get the yoke of regulation removed, that sector is going to see a pickup in terms of activity and job growth as well. And I'm sure that's welcome to the people in that sector as well. Information, still struggling with that transition. State and local government, I see some job growth there. I don't know if it's enough to alleviate the burden that county employees are facing here with all this growth and trying to manage it. But as population and as the economy grows, the demand for government services grows with it. And we've been pretty conservative, I would say, in terms of hiring in this sector. But we're going to need to do so in order to meet the demand for those services. Trade, transportation. I'm going to wrap it up here. I think we're going to take some questions, perhaps, before we move on. Sure. And they're going to be submitted by tweet, I guess. How about that? Everything's by tweet.
And who knows, we may have one coming from Washington. You just never know.
I'm going to answer
tweet.
in 100. Yeah, I hope one doesn't come in from Washington. Thank you.
It's hashtag OC Summit 17. Hashtag OC Summit 17. You can send those in. And the questions we don't have time for, the county staff's going to make sure we get those to Sean to try to get those answered for you. While you may be putting your questions in, and do this later on for our panel as well, be thinking about those questions. But hashtag OC Summit 17. Sean, let me throw out one real quick. We all look at interest rates, and we know it's a mixed bag of good or bad if they're going up or down. What are some of your thoughts on interest rates, what may or may not come about, and what it means for the economy?
Sure. Well, I think I mentioned in my remarks, Fred, that immediately in the wake of the election results, interest rates rose. Longer-term interest rates increased. We saw the 10-year bond jump up. I think that's likely to continue. As far as monetary policy is concerned, the Fed has raised interest rates twice in the past 2 years. In December of each of 2015 and 2016. And they raised interest rates by 0.25 percentage point. So it became a holiday tradition of sorts for the Fed to raise interest rates. But I think the pace in 2017 will pick up. I think we're likely to see 3 or 4 interest rate hikes in the short end. I think in the long end we'll continue to see rates rise as inflation and economic growth pick up. I don't think it's going to be a huge spike in rates in the near term that somehow could threaten or undermine economic growth, but I think it will reflect the fact that economic growth and inflation will be higher.
Okay, great. Eric, any questions yet on the hashtag? Nope. Okay, I think we're in with that, but we want to make sure you do put your questions in. Eric and the team will pass those on to Dr. Snaith and get responses back to you. Remember, hashtag OC Summit 7. Oh, we do have one that's popped up. Here goes Sean. Any emerging industry you believe the Orlando MSA should target that's suited for our unique assets? What industry should we be targeting?
I don't have any sort of industry that I'm going to pull out of a hat that nobody's ever heard of, because I think, in my work with the EDC and the work that the High Tech Corridor does, and, I think these industries have been identified. I think we've got strengths that tie into to high tech, that tie into modeling and simulation. How that spins off and how that emerges. The synergy between that and the medical field. Those sort of intersections between our strengths, to me, represent the most fruitful areas to sort of mine for new possibilities, as opposed to suddenly trying to find a completely different area.
Right, but it sounds like our economic bones are good. We have good bones to build upon.
We've got a big boned economy, thick.
Great.
No osteoporosis here.
Great. Thank you so much. Folks, Dr. Snaith, without doubt, is a cherished treasure for us here in Central Florida. What other national economist do you know that could weave in the handsome Joe Cocker into a speech, talk about business pheromones, or insert the visual of termite mounds on the savannah? Will you please join me in welcoming our Dr. Sean Snaith? Thank you, Sean. Well done. Well, Dr. Snaith mentioned the very, very important factor of the talent supply pipeline, And we're very fortunate here today to have a first-time release study that's looking at Central Florida's talent supply pipeline and the workforce readiness issues that we're facing. To set the stage for releasing that study, I want to bring up Pam Neighbors, who is the president and CEO of CareerSource in Central Florida. Pam has managed this project. And just a little bit about Pam to properly set the stage for her. Pam has run the professional gauntlet when it comes to preparing herself for this leadership position. She's been a professional for nearly 20 years in leadership experience in workforce development. Her career progression spans from working as a frontline career counselor to being an engaging trainer. She's been a strategic planner, budget and financial manager, innovative program designer, successful grant developer, program manager, and now serves as the president and CEO for the second largest workforce board in Florida. Please join me in welcoming Ms. Pam Neighbors.
Thank you so much, Fred, and thank you, Mayor, for this wonderful economic summit. It's very hard to follow Dr. Snaith, but I am always so inspired by anything that he says, because I really wish I had a Dr. Snaith when I took economics back in college. I wouldn't have needed that knife. So CareerSource Central Florida is very privileged to be a part of the Economic Summit today and to tell you about the talent supply study that we have been working on. And I am going to get my slides ready here. So, in validation of what Dr. Snaith said, it's all about jobs. And as he so eloquently spoke, we are in a state of incredible growth in the state of Florida as well as in Central Florida. And so for CareerSource boards, workforce boards in this state and across the country, it's about getting the talent to fill those jobs to ensure our economic competitiveness. The CareerSource Florida network is part of really a network of over 600 workforce systems across the country. As Fred mentioned, CareerSource Central Florida is the second largest workforce board in this state. We work together with CareerSource Florida at the state level, setting policy for workforce development and talent pipeline, the Department of Economic Opportunity that receives the fiscal dollars from both the state and the federal level, as well as oversees and monitors how the workforce funds are spent, and then 24 regional boards across the state that actually connect business with the talent that they need. The talent supply study was really generated because as CareerSource Central Florida and my partners in Volusia, Flagler, as well as Brevard and Polk, and the Florida High Tech Corridor are working with businesses across all of the sectors that were mentioned in the previous presentation. What we hear over and over again is, I need talent, I need skills, I need workers that have the basics so that I can train them to be productive and competitive in my industry. Where is that talent? And what is the size of the talent that's being presented from our academic and technical institutions across, not just in Orange County and not just in Central Florida's 5-county area, but really the 9 counties that surround Orlando? We know that individuals move across all of these counties for work and that businesses recruit across these counties for talent. So what is the size of the region's available workforce? And what is the potential for preparing Central Floridians for those great high-skilled, high-wage jobs that are here and are coming? So the Florida Chamber is already speaking about what we need in 2020. A credentialed, degreed talent pipeline is essential for our competitiveness. Currently, here in Florida, there are 55,000 unfilled science, technology, engineering, and manufacturing jobs. We know that job growth will continue, will be 12%. We need those STEM disciplines as well as business, professional, construction, and all indicators point to identifying ways to first capture the number of talent opportunities we have, as well as then preparing the individuals in our economy for opportunities. These are just a couple of slides that show, just in the last couple of weeks, the Orlando Business Journal has been highlighting the exceptional growth here in Central Florida, Daytona, and Orlando. The percent of change in private sector job growth is just tremendous. One interesting thing to me was also highlighted was that these companies are currently recruiting for high-wage business and professional jobs. Where are they going to get that skilled industry credential that they need? And so one of the things that CareerSource Central Florida, along with my partners in Brevard, Marcy Murphy is my counterpart, and Robin King in Flagler Volusia, looked at was how, and the Florida High Tech Corridor Council, Randy Barrage, also a partner in the study, talked about is, could we look at really the landscape of educational, academic, technical institutions that are producing credentialed talent and take a snapshot of what the size of that talent looks like, what is the potential for moving that talent to the industries that need that talent. So I mentioned the 3 regional workforce boards together with the High Tech Corridor Council. The study area is actually a 9-county area surrounding Orlando, and in that area are 58 educational institutions, accredited institutions and accredited programs that produce talent in the skills and areas that we need for growth. The study will seek to determine impacts of graduates from educational programs on our talent pipeline. I'd like to bring up Dr. Vinette Lizardo, my partner in the study, and who from the University of Central Florida and the Office of Research and Commercialization has been working with CareerSource Central Florida since April of last year to talk a little bit about initial findings in the study and what is coming as we move forward with further research. So, Dr. Lizardo.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for having me here. Thank you, Pam, for the introduction, Dr. Snaith for the past presentation, and thank you, Mayor Jacobs, for hosting this. It's wonderful to see all of you in this room. Hopefully some of the information we have will give you insights on our talent pipeline moving forward. What we were focusing on primarily is the academic side of that pipeline. All right. Okay. So when we started this study, and Pam and me met some time ago, we figured we'd break it down into a few phases. So the first phase that we had was discovery. So we had to set the guidelines for how are we going to look at post-secondary institutions in our counties. So what we did was we wanted to find all the accredited schools in this 9-county area: Osceola, Brevard, Orange, Seminole, Polk, Flagler, Lake, and Sumter County schools. Once we discovered all of these schools, the next phase was to quantify how many people were in these schools, how many people completed programs from these schools. So when we did this, we used the IPEDS, the Integrated Post-Secondary Education Data System. Now, The reason we used iPads is if you're a school that receives Title IV funding from federal government, you are required to file these surveys. So it's a pretty good data source. Of course, it's the best one we have, but it also comes with its caveats. I'll leave those for the actual report, but for just to kind of give a thing, that's our data source that we used, and from this data source, we were able to retrieve information on these schools, the people completing, the credential workforce coming out of the schools. Once we complete this, the next phase is going to be mapping. So how many of these completions are going to map to different industries? And that's kind of where it will really show the local developers, the economic planners, where these students could go. And finally, the last phase of this project is what's the impact of this? So these students coming out, if we can find every single one of them a job in the local area, in the industries they're going to move into, what is the impact of that to the local community and the state? All right. So the first finding that we have is the enrollments. Now, if we look at our 9-county area, we've rolled it up into the 4 boards that are servicing those 9 counties. So as you can see, we have over 250,000 students enrolled at all these 58 post-secondary accredited institutions. That's a pretty big number, with our Central Florida County servicing over 150,000 of those students. The next finding, which is what we call the credential attainment. So this is something we were able to do, which earlier you just had a number for completions. What we have now is not just a number for the completions, we also have the level of the completion. So this is pretty important information for companies coming in that would require to know at what level are these students coming out? What's the level of their knowledge? How many people may have doctorates? How many people may have bachelor's, master's? So those are things that we can now present as a result of this study for each of the career source boards. So these are the credentialed attainments. These are students that have completed a program, attained a degree at those levels. So we can see in our area we have over 75,000 completions. So that's a pretty healthy ratio of completions to actual enrollment of about a 3-to-1 ratio. So the next steps now. So now comes the part which it's already in the works. What we're doing right now is mapping these completions. So let me show you a little. So we have our completions right there, which get mapped to the industries. And once we map them to the industries at the different levels, we can then determine what is the economic impact of these jobs, right? So we have our student completions that get mapped to the various industries, and those industries will then give us the economic impact. Now, as a result of the economic impact, we can tell not just the direct impact, but how it affects the community as a whole. And that's why the economic impact gives us a good picture. So this study from start to finish will give us the view or a snapshot of our area of the talented workforce coming from the academic side. With that, what I will do now is hand the mic back to Pam so she can complete this. Oh, Fred.
Thank you, Dr. Lazzardo. Appreciate you giving us that empirical foundation upon which to guide our discussions with the panel. At this time, I'd like to ask our workforce development panel to come forward, along with Pam Neighbors, who's going to be their moderator. I want to remind our audience again, hashtag OC Summit 17, hashtag OC Summit 17. Operators are standing by, but get your questions ready for our panelists, because they're not only going to have a great discussion led by Pam and some questions that she has prepared, but we want to have your questions and your input as well. So Pam, to you and your panel.
Thank you. I'll just one last wrap up on the study. At the Career Source Central Florida booth, there is a summary of the study that Dr. Lazzardo had mentioned that you can take a look for yourself. So I have the privilege and honor of introducing the esteemed panelist to my left. First of all, we have our School Superintendent, Dr. Barbara Jenkins. We have Dr. Thad Seymour, the UCF Downtown President. We have Dr. Sandy Shugart, President of Valencia College. And Crystal Searcy, our Economic Development Director for our Metro EDC partnership, now combined regional economic engine. Welcome.
Thank you.
So, and remember that if you have any questions for the panel, remember to do the hashtag and send the questions up as we work through our panelists. So, Dr. Seymour, I'd like to start with you. You just heard about the study that is looking at the actual number of enrollments and certifications, credentials that are coming out of our academic institutions. The number of degrees produced each year is very important. But what do we need to focus on in terms of ensuring that the experience level of the graduates are ready to step into the many workforce opportunities that are being presented?
Sure. And first of all, thanks. Thrilled to be here. Great to see such a full room. And this is such an important time in the history of our region and such an optimistic time. I'm very excited about this conversation. The numbers, we have to say, are impressive. The numbers of degrees that we are producing throughout the continuum of education. I can speak for what we're focused on at UCF, but I think you would hear the same from Barbara and Sandy about what they're doing. It's one thing to deliver a student to the workforce with a credential, whatever that degree might be. But what employers are telling us all the time is we want them to go beyond just that piece of paper. And so one of the key elements of our collective impact strategic plan at UCF was to accelerate the pace of experiential learning that moves the classroom outside of the four walls of the university and creates many more opportunities for our students to experience the workforce in one way or another. And that could be work study projects, it could be for credit or non-credit experience in the workforce. And one of the sort of points on the spear of that is what we're doing with UCF Downtown. And we specifically chose a range of programs that would be well suited to being downtown because they could be programs that would intersect and connect our students with employers before they graduate. And so when they go out into the workforce, they have another level and layer of experience that makes them get up to speed that much faster. And it also helps them, we believe, make better choices about the career path. Getting a little workforce experience in an industry or a career you think you may want to go to may help you decide, actually I want to move in this direction a little bit sooner. And all of those things go way beyond how we defined higher education 10 or 20 years ago.
Yes, and we are ahead, really, in our partnership between our state college and the university. And so, Dr. Shugart, I wonder if you would talk a little bit about the Direct Connect program with the university and what that's meant to retaining talent in our community.
Thanks, Pam, and hello, everybody. So Direct Connect is old news here, I guess. It was launched in 2005. It's not old news around the rest of the country. It has grown to be this sort of national benchmark for institutional collaboration. And the shift in thinking required to get that is that most students don't go to the college the way we did, certainly the way I did. If you're a gray head like me, you probably went to college right after you graduated from high school, or soon thereafter. You probably left town to do it. You probably lived on or near campus in a hovel of some kind. And if you worked half-time or less. And that now represents 14% of the American undergraduates. Wow. The vast majority of people who are pursuing post-secondary education swirl through multiple institutions, move during the process. Almost all of them work. 80% of our students are employed somewhere. Mm-hmm. The whole model, this sort of linear thinking about higher education generally, is flawed. And the better paradigm is to understand an educational ecosystem. And to do that, the institutions, which historically are deeply self-involved, have to look outside themselves and say, what counts is what students experience, how they experience all of us, not how we experience them. And intentionally designing the ecosystem of institutions to work together and to create pathways for students that they can count on, that are not irrational and bureaucratic, and that lead to meaningful outcomes for them at higher levels, is the work now of all of educational leaders. We have to do that together. You can't do that separately and in competition. So we happen to be in a community that was perfectly situated for that for a variety of reasons, and we happen to have the right leaders at the right time. And really, pre-K to graduate school, there is no better education ecosystem in the country. And we have to be that good because we don't have some of the assets other communities do. So if you took our 2.2 million people and moved them to someplace in the Northeast, there'd be 75 or 80 colleges to serve them. Here we've got about 6. So we have to be more efficient, more connected, able to roll out innovation quickly and respond nimbly because we don't have that other kind of asset. I think I'd rather be where we are. And I know our students love the notion that we work together, whether it's the downtown campus or the way the tech centers, the technical colleges and Valencia Connect, or even across institutions in the same sector. Seminole and Valencia have a rich history of collaboration. Those are hugely important parts of the education infrastructure. For those of you who are employers and are seeking talent, it means you got to rethink the way you approach your connections to education. The old model is to place an order. I'll take 5 of those and 3 of these, just send them over, and then be unhappy with them. And that model just doesn't work. The places that are producing great talent extend that ecosystem into the workplace. And so the employers are full partners in the development of the programs, in the delivery of the programs, and in situating the students as they transition into work.
They need to be a stakeholder as part of that. Dr. Jenkins, in the connection between the school district and Valencia College, can you talk a little bit about student sharing and the dual enrollment process?
Certainly. There are a couple of things I would love to stress. It may be a well-kept secret, but we have over 20,000 of our high school students actually complete college-level courses. 20,000 through the advanced placement, and then another 24,000 through dual enrollment and some of our CTE programs as well. Tremendous leadership team. Orange Technical College, sitting right over there, are behind so much of that growth. But also, Sandy and his team at Valencia have helped to build those pathways between schools. Dual enrollment is an opportunity for young people to finish some of their college courses before they leave high school. Saves money, certainly becomes more convenient. Lately, we've been able to host more of those courses on the high school campus thanks to that partnership, and so that increases the opportunity for even more students. Here's the thing that we're most excited about. Just as Sandy talked about direct connect between Valencia and UCF, we now have Tech Express between our K-12 system and Valencia. And so a year ago, we launched Tech Express. It provides that same kind of pathway so students can move along a continuum, if you will. They may need to get off to work, they may need to get off and work for quite some time, but they're on a continuum where they have a guaranteed acceptance into the Valencia degree program from taking the beginnings of their courses at the high school level in their technical education programs. That ecosystem, I love when Dr. Schugert refers to it that way. It provides something very different for our young people that we do not believe exists elsewhere. That seamless continuum where students can get on and off as they have a need either to go into a high-paying job or a profession or to continue their career in the academic realm. And we're very pleased with that partnership. I will tell you, Valencia also hired Tech Express advisors that are on our 4 campuses for Orange Technical College, so we help guide students through those pathways so they can be successful. Very excited about that.
Excellent. Crystal, as the Executive Vice President of the Economic Development Commission, when you hear about the supply coming out of our institutions and you hear about the incredible ecosystem that we have here. What do you need as the sales organization for the business community? What marketing ammunition do you need to sell this community and our workforce reputation?
Well, thank you, Pam, and thank you for including me on the panel. First of all, I think it's not only the connection among our educational institutions, which creates that continuum for the individual that's important, but the collaboration that you've already spoken to with industry and economic development as a spokesperson for what business needs are, so that's important. With respect to what information we need to sell our workforce to prospective industry, and let me just qualify that. When I say prospective industry, most people think when they're talking to economic developers that we mean businesses outside that we can recruit. And while those are very exciting and those constitute the announcements and create a lot of energy and are important in their own right, I'm generally referring to expansion of existing industry. That's where the lion's share of the growth is, and so we certainly don't overlook that. We recognize it as our focus. But with respect to what we need to sell, I'm very grateful to Mayor Jacobs and her team for creating the platform for selling. That is, this branding campaign, which has already been referred to, Orlando, you don't know the half of it, is really the platform from which we sell. Right? There's so many perspectives out there, most of them not full, about what Orlando is and what it offers, and that's true of our workforce as well. From outside, prospective businesses, but also from inside. We're learning in the third year of this branding campaign that local residents don't know the other half of it. And so that's the new push. We began with marketing that to site location consultants whose daily business it is to work with companies who are making decisions about where they will expand and create jobs and invest their capital, but also with CEOs themselves. And CEOs themselves repeatedly tell us that workforce development and the workforce, the talent pool, both today and in the future, is vital for their success, the number one ingredient, if you will. And so to sell that, we need information. We need to demonstrate to these prospective businesses that we can meet their needs. It's not unlike any other customer-business relationship. We need to demonstrate that we can meet their talent needs today and in the future, and that includes a whole variety of characteristics about the labor force. The quality, the reference has already been made to experiential learning, which is one of the characteristics that makes our student population, more attractive to potential employers. But other characteristics like work ethic and multilingual, multicultural populations, their technology aptitudes, and all of the things that these institutions are working together to ensure that we can tell. And that's not to ignore the important ingredient, the primary data, which is we have an abundant labor supply. And that's what the study is demonstrating, that we have available skill sets that are specific to what industries need today. And so all of that data in the aggregate and in detailed levels is what we need to appropriately sell our workforce.
Absolutely. And retaining our businesses is really critical. In Dr. Snaith's slides, we saw the incredible growth of the construction industry. And at CareerSource Central Florida, we hear from big and small construction companies that are saying, I need skilled workers. Dr. Shugart, I know that Valencia has a pilot project that it's working with us and with other partners in accelerating the skill to job for construction workers. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. And in many ways, this is an example of lots of opportunities in our local economy, which I'll try to connect at the end of the comment. So several years ago, we were fortunate to have a great relationship with the ABC. They came to visit with us and said, construction's on the growth again, and our workforce disappeared on us during the recession. They're not coming back. We need help. And that started a conversation that led really to some very useful insights about what I would call the lower and middle rungs of the income ladder. And that insight was this, that that we have a huge unskilled labor force in cold storage. This is the most powerful economy I know of in the world for putting unskilled people into low-paying jobs. And it's the part of the economy we don't want to discuss, but we have to discuss it, because no matter how strong we build the engine in high wages, the caboose is too heavy to pull. Now, the industries that are supported by those low wages are wonderful, and we treasure them. The problem isn't that the entry-level jobs pay poorly, it's that there's no mobility out of them. And so generating economic mobility, the capacity to climb a ladder, a few rungs even, is essential to the long-term health of the economy. So construction represents one of those opportunities. So here we've got unskilled people who are very hardworking, and now jobs that require skills that can be taught relatively quickly and move them 1, 2, or 3 rungs up the ladder. So that resulted, for example, in the initial work in a 5-week construction certificate program in which students complete quickly. It's not state funded, it's not federally funded, except that the tuition often comes through workforce for the students who qualify. It is intensive training, and they finish in 5 weeks with 3 credentials. They have an OSHA card so that they're safe. They have a kind of a skills passport and some other things. When they graduate, they move to jobs almost immediately at $12.50, $13 an hour. Now, that doesn't sound like a lot of money, but if you're making $8.50, it's transformational for your family. You might be able to cut back from 2 jobs to 1. You may be able to save up enough money to take the next step with your education. Creating rungs on the ladder in that bottom third of the ladder is as important as attracting jobs in the top third. We have to do both at the same time. So the construction certificate is just an example of that. And we've got dozens now of certificates either deployed or in demand in transportation, in construction, in public safety, in manufacturing, in metalworking, in welding, in quality inspections, all sorts of other things, cooking. And the goal, Pam, is to move from what is now a large-scale pilot project that's succeeding with about 300 students, including, by the way, young men who are about to be discharged from jail, who will either have a job in 10 days or they'll make one for themselves. And it's working very well with the cooperation of the chief of the jail. We think we can scale that to 5,000 people a year. And I think that could be transformational for the community. If 5,000 families a year are getting a 25% increase in earning power from a short-term training experience and filling jobs in areas of critical shortage in construction, manufacturing, and other areas, I think that changes the equation for the community.
It really does. And for that individual in construction, many of those trained individuals are now eligible to go into an actual apprenticeship where those wages double as they earn more certifications and credentials. Dr. Jenkins, you also have a targeted technical program in Eatonville looking at welding skills. Can you talk about that?
We do. It's a program that's under development, but I will tell you welding has become one of our more popular. I believe the last time Mike Armbruster mentioned it to me, we had over 100 on the waiting list, and so we're expanding that program.
I could put them all to work.
Let me tell you, and they go to work at quite handsome salaries.
Yes.
We have 2 graduates who just started $80,000 a year.
Wow.
Jobs.
Amazing.
And so it's going to become even more popular as word spreads on that. So we're very excited about construction and welding that we're expanding in the Eatonville area. We've got other phenomenal programs, laser photonics through partnership with Northrop Grumman at Wekiva High School. We've got cybersecurity, which will be quite in demand over at Cypress Creek High School. Students learning in areas that will become more and more critical in the world that they live in. We have partnerships with many businesses. I have to mention Lockheed Martin actually gave us a $2 million grant for STEM education. Project Lead the Way actually has a K-12 hands-on, project-based, problem-solving curriculum for students from kindergarten through 12th grade. $2 million, that will expand to every one of our schools by next year. Project Lead the Way is nationally recognized curriculum around helping students and launching them into interest in STEM education and STEM careers. And then those partnerships, quite frankly, often include internships, so that students have experience in the actual field before they ever graduate. And we could not do that without so many of our partners that have helped make it a reality. One thing that we're most excited about, if I didn't mention this, my Orange Technical College would be quite upset. So we launched Project Launch at the Mid-Florida Tech campus. It is a state-of-the-art simulation, animation, gaming training center. It's in collaboration with the National Center for Simulation. Central Florida is becoming an epicenter for simulation,
yes.
And so we are very pleased that we will be producing large numbers of graduates in that field as well.
That's exceptional. It's exciting to hear about.
It is exciting.
Dr. Seymour, as we talk about our regional talent pipeline, how do we, as a community, really differentiate ourselves? How do we think differently and more creatively than other regions in our state or around the country about investment in education and training? Because all of the things we're talking about require investment, stakeholder investment from our institutions, from our community, and from our businesses.
Yeah, and before going there, I want to highlight what both Barbara and Sandy talked about, because we should not take for granted their willingness to engage with our industry to be responsive. And the programs they've built that are responsive to needs in the industry that ultimately transform the lives and livelihoods of those families is phenomenal. And we should not take that for granted, because that does not happen in most other places. But I think, to your point, one of the things as we built the UCF strategic plan, we looked at sort of the next 20 years and looked at patterns and trends in higher education across the country and the world. And one of the clear messages we got was that we need to think differently about funding higher education going forward, and that there's been a trend, and we don't think it will change, in gradually lower state funding for state universities, not just in Florida, but across the country, which means that gap needs to be built. And if we're going to differentiate Central Florida on talent, and for that portion that represents higher education talent, we need to think differently. So clearly our foundation is working very hard. Philanthropy will play a very important role. Mm-hmm. But one of the things that we discovered is that, in fact, some of those regions that have done best have figured out how to provide more local support to higher education, mm-hmm. both their state college or community college systems and the universities. I don't have an answer for that, but the same old way of doing it is not going to be the answer. Mm-hmm. And so that gap, and just to stay even, means we've got to find new sources of funding. To compete internationally, as we all want to do, that means we actually have to get more than just replace what we may lose over time, but actually invest more. But clearly what you're hearing from the data that we've heard is that there's probably no greater return mm-hmm. we're going to see than that invested in education. Absolutely.
Crystal, when in economic development we hear a lot about incentives, and so we've talked about, incentives are thought of as an investment for businesses that are moving here or expanding. How important is the workforce when it comes to decision making by a company to expand or to move here to Central Florida?
Well, so I agree with Dr. Snaith. It's always good to agree with the professor, right? But clearly, workforce is, hands down, it is the most important factor, and that is borne out in economic development community. We are familiar with a periodical called the Area Development Magazine, and annually they survey CEOs throughout the nation and ask them to rank factors which impact their business location decisions. Historically, repeatedly, workforce labor availability is number one. Mm-hmm. Sometimes labor cost is high up there, but always labor availability. And we know that means more than 5 of these and 3 of those, right? It's not just a volume question, although that is important for us to make sure that businesses understand the truly impressive numbers of graduates that we have and the students that are running through our Central Florida educational system. But beyond that, the skill sets that are specific to the needs in their industries. And so that runs the gamut about whether they're looking for CNC operators, machinists, or welders, all the way up to is it VR, AR, virtual reality, augmented reality type technology skill sets. And if I were Sean Snaith, I'd do a whole lot with augmented reality, but I'll stay away from that. I think, MS&T is a big area. Obviously, there's so much that we can do with the technology to tell the other part of the story that businesses don't perceive from afar, especially, but as I said earlier, also existing industry. But it is critical. CEOs tell us that over and over and over again.
I had an opportunity this past week to hear from a transportation panel about automation in vehicles, and it was amazing. Florida is really ahead of much of the rest of the country in looking at automated vehicles. This is to anyone. How do we prepare our students for jobs that we don't even know what they are at this point? Driverless vehicles, driverless trucks, and the automation behind actually moving them. What kinds of jobs might there be there? And how do we prepare students and our workforce with the skills that are going to be needed for those kinds of opportunities?
I'd love to jump in on that one. I think there are a couple of areas we have to make sure our young people are prepared with. First of all, they have to be able to live in a digital world in a technologically proficient manner. Thanks to our school board and our taxpayers, we deployed 72,000 devices. So our high school students each have their own laptop, and they are accustomed to working in and becoming even more adept at working in that digital realm. For college or career, it is their future. And quite frankly, they're more comfortable with it than we are.
It's true.
But secondly, I think a critical skill is around this notion of problem solving and working on projects and being able to collaborate. And not just with the students that are in their classroom. What we're fascinated with, but they're quite comfortable with, is beyond the brick and mortar. We have students working on projects between high schools. So their partners are not sitting at the same table. Sometimes they're not even in the same classroom or the same school with them. And so that ability to collaborate digitally and to do problem solving and creative thinking and critical thinking, I think is the future for our young people, because jobs that will exist then don't exist now.
Right.
But the skill sets, I believe, will be the same. An ability to collaborate, problem solving, and an adeptness in a digital world, which is the world that they live in. We call them digital natives. It is not second nature to them. It is first nature to them.
Right. Any other thoughts about preparation?
As a research university, part of our charge is to make sure we're on the cutting edge of important technology and other trends in all disciplines. And so it's our responsibility to hire faculty who are anticipating not just the jobs for their current graduates, but those 5, 10, 15 years out. And we have some great examples. We've talked today about some of our real strengths as a region. The university is connected to every one of those in one way or another. We have a new exciting smart sensor initiative underway with a new name, Bridge, that is something that opens up. We have to be training workforce for that kind of an industry, and we're doing that building on a foundation we already have. So play to the strengths that we have, connect our research faculty to industry, and and recruit students to fill those positions, those slots in those programs.
Great.
Yeah, I might say that in addition to my colleagues' comments, it's very rare that a new job involves, a new kind of career involves radically new skills. In fact, it's most breakthrough technologies, when they hit the market, don't involve terribly new things. They've just recombined things in a novel way. What's novel about them is the market that they've discovered for some useful device. So think of the first iPhone. There were no technological innovations in the iPhone. It was everything came off the shelf. Okay? Jobs are that way too. If the skills are well learned, and people are flexible enough to how to put them together in different packages for themselves, with their employers, you can adapt to all sorts of new kinds of jobs. I think we're less interested in naming 100 different degree programs than having the core of all of them be strong enough that students are flexible and responsive and able to adapt in the workplace. The most important part of all that is that, and I think often we don't talk about this, is that students have to learn, whether it's in your home, your children, or our students, have to learn that there is no substitute for effort. And every one of my kids studied music. I'm a musician. My family are musicians. I was not excited about the idea that any of them would become professional musicians for reasons we can go into later. But I wanted them to learn this, and they have. I wanted them to learn that when they practiced on Tuesday, they were no better than they were when they practiced on Monday. When they practiced on Wednesday, they were no better than they were on Tuesday. When they practiced on Thursday, they were no better than they were on Wednesday. But when they practiced on Friday, somehow, miraculously, they were better than they were on Monday. We call it the calculus of everyday living. Just the notion that consistent, daily, intentional effort is a part of every job. And if I could change one thing about the K to graduate school experience, it would be that students experience that kind of discipline in their studies.
Absolutely.
We call it grit.
Grit. I like grit.
We're trying to inject them. We're trying to inject every student with grit.
Excellent. I believe we have a question. What is our plan to ensure that girls are prepared for all of the STEM opportunities as well?
I'd like to speak a little bit to that. We have lots of partners interested in this. I see Duke Energy over here at the table who have been very generous with us to diversify, particularly on the gender basis, diversify those who are going into engineering professions. And so I think we're in our 5th or 6th year of a relationship to grow the number of women who are pursuing engineering degrees in Direct Connect in our partnership with UCF. And there's tremendous opportunity down that trail, and we're fortunate enough to have 3 or 4 engineering professors who are female at Valencia who take that mission to heart and are great role models. But diversity generally in the technical professions is a challenge for us, and I know UCF and Valencia both have sort of locked arms and said we're going to have as a specific objective in our work to diversify the professions. And that's certainly the STEM professions, but also law and accounting and a lot of other areas where women or people of color are underrepresented. And we're able to do that in part because as an open door institution, Valencia is twice as diverse as UCF, and when our students successfully make that transition in Direct Connect, they add to the diversity of the graduating class in a pretty profound way at UCF, in a diverse community already, and they're proven students. So I think there's lots of opportunity to do that. And that partnership extends into the K-12 world as well. So Barbara can tell you about all sorts of partnerships, both with Valencia and UCF, in specific high schools and middle schools where we reach down and give early experiences to young people.
I think that's probably critical, that you captivate their attention and their belief that it's a profession they can pursue with success at very early ages. Girls, for example, in elementary ages, they think they're just as smart, just as good as boys are with math. By the time they get to middle school, they start to waver. And so we have to capture their imagination early on. Project Lead the Way, for example, with those engineering-type activities, starting in kindergarten, and you use terms around STEM and engineering so they become more and more comfortable with it. And then you do an hour of code so everyone's exposed to it. Girls coding, different clubs and activities we can have in place, but it has to really start young.
Absolutely. We have another question. Are there educational gaps that we aren't meeting to fill our projected job growth in Orange County?
Yes.
Yes.
Let me speak to one. Suppose I told you that I could guarantee you 1,000 new jobs, net new jobs a year, at about $70,000 each and up. Anybody interested in that? Well, that's the number of vacant nursing positions. We had a summit earlier in the year with all the CEOs of our great hospitals and their chief nursing officers. with UCF Valencia, Seminole, and Lake Sumter all at the table. And what we discerned together was that we are producing 1,000 fewer nurses annually than we need to, and we're already big producers. So we're trying to figure out together, all right, how do we ratchet up production of both associate degree nurses and baccalaureate level nurses to at least 1,000 more a year. Every one of them gets a job, and every one of them has a family future that's dramatically different because they got a job in a growing profession that pays that well. So, yes, there are many areas like that where there are existing vacant positions. You heard 55,000, I think, earlier today, where if we can align the resources to produce people for them, those are jobs you don't have to recruit.
Yes, absolutely.
And we have, for the nursing program, that's another prime example of that continuum where they start in high school and they can get their LPN and then they move ahead into their degree programs as well. And I will tell you, so I was going to mention nursing. Of course, we can always use more teachers. That's self-serving. But I was also going to mention in our entertainment industry, we have severe vacancies as well. And so J.P. Morgan Chase, United Arts partnered program over at Evans High School to help train and prepare students for behind-the-scenes entertainment, because there's a vast industry and high-paying jobs for behind the scene that need to be filled. And so that partnership includes some opportunities for students to do internships as well in the entertainment industry. People don't think, when people say entertainment industry, they don't think of the vast number of jobs required to support what happens in front of the curtain.
Right, exactly. Crystal, I wondered if there were any others that came to mind quickly for you outside, apart from healthcare and...
In terms of educational gaps, no. But it does bring to mind the notion that diversification of our economy is important. And so the industries for which we prepare workers will grow. The businesses will be attracted by the ready workforce and the talent pipeline. And so, you know, that is a goal of government, I think, and a good one, that we diversify the economy so that it is more resilient, and that we're not reliant on exclusively tourism and construction. We've all experienced that. We need to be resilient to changes in the economy. And so preparing students and graduates and our labor force beyond that to fill in those gaps. Dr. Snaith mentioned that we should expect growth in financial services. I think he's talking about across the board, not just in this region, but preparing to meet that need is important.
Absolutely. I think we have time for... There was one more question from the audience. What incentives are in place to ensure that underrepresented populations are given the opportunity to benefit from Orange County growth?
Let me speak to that sort of indirectly, first speaking to the reality of higher education here. And that, Sandy mentioned earlier that in another city you'd have a much larger number of higher educational institutions than we have here. When we did our strategic plan, we focused very much on this question of how big can UCF become, and Valencia is bigger. I mean, it's these two institutions are huge. We came to the answer that around this formula, some of you have heard of, scale times excellence equals impact. That in fact, if we can be big, no matter how big, and great, the impact is enormous. And I think the same is true for Valencia. But because we have these two large institutions, and we have a history of retaining a high percentage of our graduates in our region, we have unique control over our talent pool in a way that most other cities don't, where you may have a large number of very good institutions, a high percentage of whose graduates go someplace else. And so that ability to control our own destiny is really powerful. And in doing that and having a philosophy of being inclusive, not exclusive, like many other smaller, more elite institutions, we have the chance through who we encourage to come to our institutions to diversify the workforce as we train those students to go out into the workforce.
That's excellent. And that was a really, you answered a question I had in looking at the talent supply study. When you think about 75,000 credentialed individuals. Many of the businesses and our partners have asked us, how do we know how many stay here? And so you actually talked about, and it seems very true, that the majority do stay in our community that are credentialed here, different than perhaps University of Florida or the University in Tallahassee, what is that? FSU.
Imagine if all Gators stayed in Gainesville.
Maybe, right. Imagine if they did.
I would add, we have developed in the last 3 years Minority Achievement Office. Achievement gaps are usually opportunity gaps. And so we have to have a concerted effort before they graduate from high school to make sure we look at potential and at data that says certain students ought to at least be encouraged and given a chance in some high-level, more rigorous classes. And so we have the calculus project, we have an AP program that pushes more and more students into those more rigorous courses so that they're prepared to make the transition to higher ed and that they're accustomed to that more rigorous course load. But you have to intentionally target and pinpoint and open the gates wide rather than gatekeeping and narrowing the opportunities. In Orange County, we're committed to opening the gates wide and getting more and more students, and we've led the country and the state in some of that growth, getting more and more students that qualify for free and reduced lunch or that are in underrepresented minority groups into those more rigorous classes, which in turn means for a brighter future where they can enter secondary education.
Absolutely, all very important.
Pam, if I could just add from the business perspective, a diverse workforce is very attractive. Again, I mean, they ask us regularly, what does the workforce look like? It's important to have diversity of gender and ethnicity and age. All of those things matter to businesses and therefore should matter to us, and we should prepare the workforce so that we can, again, meet the customer's needs with business as customer.
Well, I hear that we are just about out of time, so I would like to join all of you in thanking our panelists. Thank you. And all of our panelists' bios are in your program, and I'm going to turn the program back over to Fred.
Great. Thank you, Pam, and thank you to the panelists. Ladies and gentlemen, we've received a very unique blessing here today. This is, in baseball parlance, a murderer's row of long ball hitters when you think about it when it comes to educational workforce preparation and economic development. I mean, Crystal Searcy is on the senior management team for not only one of the nation's best economic development commissions, but also with the upcoming merger with the Central Florida Partnership, that organization is about to become turbocharged when it comes to not just economic development, but also when it comes to community building. And President Shugart, well, folks, if there's a better state college or community college president in the country, well, let's just stop it right there. There is not a better president of any state college or community college in the country than Sandy Shugart. Dr. Thad Seymour is bringing the experience and acumen that he brought to Lake Nona as a senior member of their leadership team, now to heading up the UCF downtown team as he works alongside Valencia in developing the UCF and Valencia downtown campus. And Barbara, our triple UCF Knight, I have to put in that shameless plug, but Dr. Jenkins is at the helm of not only one of the nation's largest school systems. We rank what in the nation now, Barbara? Number 9. Folks, top 10 in the country, number 9 in the country for the size of the school system. But as you heard here today, that school system is changing very dynamically in how they serve the needs of our students for their future preparation in the workforce. And of course, Pam Neighbors has revitalized and reinvented CareerSource, and she's done it through partnerships. Please join me once again in thanking our panel. Well, folks, we started this morning with Dr. Sean Snaith, and he let us know that there's a lot more sunshine in the forecast than there are clouds. We got a few storms on the horizon, but we'll steer around those. But there's optimism that abounds for the future when it comes to Central Florida's economic outlook. We had Dr. Lazaro gave us the empirical research that ties or showcases that linkage between the educational engines and their ability to produce the workforce. We saw that what Pam and her team are putting together, but that's going to become our roadmap for the future. And then we heard from our panelists that when it comes to those engines that drive the workforce preparation, that engine's becoming much more nimble, quicker, and more mobile. And they're responding to the needs of not just industry, but also to the citizens and the students that are going through that educational ecosystem that Dr. Shugart responded to. Well, folks, this morning, I don't know about you, but I had some traffic coming here down 436 and out Beach Line. But every time I see those cars and I slow down for traffic, I like it because that's the daily dance of commerce. And when you leave here today, if you're going east on the B line, you're going to pass that world-class airport that we have that Phil Brown and his team runs. It brings us so many visitors and business people from across the globe. If you take 408 all the way to the end, you're going to run into the research park and the best and the nation's #1 cluster in simulation and training. If you head to the west, you're going to find yourself in the world's #1 premier destination for tourism, and that is our front door through which the whole world sees us. If you go north up I-4, although I know it's supposed to be east, but you're going north on I-4, you're going to pass two of the biggest and best hospital healthcare systems in the country. And as you go further north, you go through Maitland Center and up toward Lake Mary, and you have some of the largest concentrations of high-tech and professional services taking place. I don't know about you, but when I'm in traffic, I'm going to enjoy the dance because there's no other place in this country that I'd rather be dancing. And we're enjoying so much of this positive outlook and prosperity because at the helm of our county is a mayor who understands the importance of economic development and has kept economic development on the front of her radar screen through her first 6 years as our mayor. Please join me in welcoming back to the podium our mayor, Teresa Jacobs.
All right, so not only does Fred do a great job at moderating, and that's why we have him here, but of course I also have him here because, golly, days does here make me feel good about myself. Thank you. I don't know how much I'm going to owe you for that, but I know I don't have enough to pay you for those tremendous compliments. Seriously, folks, about the dancing, I do want to mention that sometimes it feels a little bit like slow dancing. And for me, that's good because if anybody's seen me dance, slower is better. No dancing is probably best. Fred, thanks for keeping us organized, keeping us on time. Thanks for your energy and the passion and insight you bring each year to this event. What an impressive gathering of speakers that we've had here today. Every single presentation and discussion has been informative. Everything that we've heard, I think, validates where we are and the opportunity ahead of us. And it really is a remarkable time to be right here in Central Florida. And it seems like each year we gather, things are getting better. And that's a part, in large part, a tribute to each and every one of you, as I said at the beginning. I was especially intrigued to learn about the exploding need for certificate-level workers. I don't know about y'all, but I found that very, very encouraging for a lot of reasons. You know, one of the challenges that we have here is that we talk a lot about the positives. Some of the negatives are that we have underemployed people here. We have our young folks that are coming out of high school and some that aren't going on to college and don't have the opportunities that they want for a meaningful career, for an opportunity to climb that ladder of success. And we see that also with some of our older workers who have been displaced and, you know, they're not at a point when they feel like they can go back and get a college degree. What are those opportunities for them? We have a lower wage scale than most of our competitive regions. And the solution to all of these is also the solution to our workforce needs. And so that's a perfect match. A lot of communities don't have that. They have a lot of people that are unemployed and no jobs, or occasionally you have places where there's too many jobs and not enough employees. In this case, what we need to do is we just need to bridge the gap between those who want more for themselves and for their lives, but maybe are just not equipped, cut out, financially able to go through 4 years. And we've got it. And we've got it because of the great work of our public school system, the great work that we have with our community college, and the great work that we have with each of you that are in the employment role. I wanted to share with you about an upcoming event and encourage you to please participate and to get the word out. It should be out on your tables there. It's an event coming up. I think it's March 2nd, is it? You should have a flyer there. The goal of this is to get more information about what types of certificate-level programs we should be offering. If you've had a chance to go on to I think it's included in there, a couple of the websites, you'd be amazed at the number of certificate-level programs we have already. So we have a great opportunity here to connect those underemployed and unemployed folks with some easy access certificate training and get them a job that is meaningful, rewarding, and gives them an opportunity. Because at the end of the day, I think we are just beginning to glimpse what our potential is as a region. And yet, when we look at the number of people in our community that are underemployed, not reaching their potential, I guarantee you this: we cannot imagine what our potential is if every single citizen in Orange County that wanted a good job had one. If every single citizen was reaching their potential, this would be absolutely phenomenal. So we're doing a tremendous job, but we are only running at about half our cylinders. Let's all work together to make sure that we're doing our part. I see a lot of elected leaders that are here. I know how engaged you are. Mayor, I see you there. I see my county commissioners that are here. I know every one of you cares dearly, and I know every citizen that's here is here because you have that heart and that passion for this community, or you wouldn't be spending your time with us. I wanted to thank Dr. I can thank him, but I can't say his name. Lesrado. Yes, I've been working so hard on my Spanish, I want to figure out how to do something with that. Lesrado from UCF. Fascinating research that you did, and a really important part of the data and the information that we need to make sure that we're utilizing and making available to all of our citizens the opportunities that they need. And of course, where would we be without Dr. Shugart and without Dr. Jenkins? And I can't emphasize enough how important your role is in helping our citizens and our young people and our not so young people find their place. We are really excited to be welcoming Crystal Searcy. Where'd Crystal go? There you are. Sorry, Crystal, great to have you here. Great to have you a part of our community. I don't know if many of you had an opportunity to meet our new EDC chairman, or executive director, who will be joining us shortly. That's Tim Giuliani. He is so exciting. You're going to absolutely love him. He fits into this community perfectly. I think within a couple of months, you're going to think he was born and raised here. And we're really, really excited about that opportunity. If I've left anybody out, Dr. Snaith, is he still here? Dr. Snaith, did he get away? There you are. Okay, so we did have one question, by the way. We did have one question that Twitter, it's not a tweet question, by the way. It didn't come up on tweet. It came up on Twitter. We got to learn this, okay? We got a president. This is the only way he apparently is going to communicate with us. So it's Twitter, and you tweet on it. And I've messed that up a lot myself, and I won't even tell you some of the mistakes I've made because they're not only politically improper, they're just improper. So do we have it up here? So we have a request. Well, I was sitting here, and you know how many times I've cornered you to say, tell me the steam cleaning story again, because it's hysterical, but I can't remember the details of it. So I just did an unscientific poll, and most of the people in this room have not heard the Sky Mall steamer story. So I am now officially asking if you could possibly incorporate that into next year's summit. We'd really appreciate it. I think this year's humor was the best humor yet. Would everybody agree with me? Was his humor off the charts? And I think, to be honest, I think part of that is because, you pointed out some of the positives of our president-elect when it comes to the economy. And there are certainly a lot of people who are concerned about some possible negative ramifications. But one of the positives that I don't think I had considered until I listened to you was the humor that may come out of the next 4 years. So thank you for that. John Morgan, I'm sure he will be excited to learn about his weeding machine. I think that's a great addition to his family collection as well. Thank you all very much for being here. With that, I bid you farewell, and we will see you back here next year, but I will look forward to seeing you every day between now.
You're watching Orange TV, your government in action, a service of Orange County government.
This is our first ever regional affordable housing summit. So the main focus is to get an understanding of the source of the problem, the root of the problem, the history of the problem. But even more important than that is what are the solutions that we can implement on a regional level?
I'm very interested in the topic. And one of the reasons that I'm interested in